Okay, let's do our little end of year awards in terms of like who was the best player for each of the Liam McCarthy teams. And we'll go alphabetically. We'll start off with Antrim. I'd make the case that it's Conal Cunning. He scored 242 in 5 championship games. And I think after the season he also had with Dunloy, not that we're necessarily counting that here, I think it'd probably be him. I'd say Neil McManus be right there in the conversation, only maybe, injury hampered him a little bit. But I'd have Conal Cunning up in this conversation.
Yeah, Colin Cunning would definitely be right up there. Obviously, brought the strong club form to his county season as well. Keelan Malloy got that wonder goal for Dunloy, obviously in the All Ireland club semi final against Thomas's, brought good form to the county as well. Thought James McNaughton, who
Yeah.
we've always thought there's a kind of a ceiling there that he's nearly ready to break through. Thought he came a bit closer to breaking through that this year. He's brilliant in that Dublin game as well. But I'd say if Antrim were going to get an All-Star nomination, it's not just because he's a corner forward and he did most of the scoring. I'd say Conal Cunning is the most likely. So I'd be happy enough to give him. I'd say he was marginally their best player of the year. Even though I saw Neil McManus scored 4-9, did he in a club game for Dunleary for Cushendall a couple of weeks ago. So despite stepping away, he's still playing as good as ever at 35.
Yeah. Okay. So next then, I suppose who's next in this conversation? If we're to go alphabetically,
Claire.
Yeah, let's go, Claire. God, who would be up there now?
I definitely have over the last 2 years. I think Shane O'Donnell has done the best hurling of his career, probably in the last 2 years. And I was only chatting to someone about this yesterday. Like, score a hat trick at 19 in an All Ireland final to get start. That puts unbelievable pressure on your shoulders. I think he's handled it unbelievably well. And I think Lohan, to be fair, like we said, maybe some negatives about Lohan there or some question marks. How he's handled O'Donnell in recent years has been outstanding. He's realised he had the concussion problems coming into 22, realised he didn't need to play a load of league games, played none actually. Same this year. He just realised that he needed him peaking for a championship. And like, it's amazing what he can do. Lack of hurling, just comes in and plays as he did. I was only looking back at that catch against Dublin.
Oh,
Remember that one that you couldn't even see in normal time. He's like a ballet dancer on his day. I thought he was brilliant this year. I'd have him right up there with Clare's best players this year.
where does Mark Rogers come into this? Because, like, in terms of like stepping up this year, he scored 427 in total. He scored a couple of big goals. Look, Adrian McGrath says O'Donnell or Conlon. Couldn't call it. I wonder, Adrian, would you throw Mark Rogers into that conversation? Because in
His
terms
own
of
club, his own club man, who he speaks woefully high of. Like
Gareth,
yeah, Rogers is brilliant this year. This is kind of a breakthrough year for him, and you're kind of thinking, is he going to hit frees for Clare next year in the championship? He probably will. And he obviously missed one or two against Kilkenny in the All Ireland semi final, but that happens. But like halfway through or 50 minutes into that All Ireland semi final, you're kind of thinking, Mark Rogers is in the All-Star conversation here. So yeah, I think he had a massive season. Adam Hogan had a huge first season as well. Maybe could be young hurler of the year potentially. But I'm kind of finding it hard to get away from O'Donnell. I thought Conlon was brilliant too. Conlon could get an All-Star centre back award this year. The only thing I'd say about that, like, did his season tail off a tiny bit after the Munster campaign? He obviously suffered a concussion against Dublin in the All Ireland quarter final. Was Kilkenny kind of played around him, I thought, in the All Ireland semi final a bit, and he wasn't able to dominate the game. But like, you go back to the Saturday evening when he came from his brother's wedding and was man of the match against Limerick. Like, that was probably one of the moments of the year. It would be O'Donnell for me, marginally.
Yeah, and Adrian McGrath is saying he can't give it to Mark Rogers because his outlad will kill me if I do. PWell74 says Conlon's legs were targeted by Limerick in the Munster final and really got the better of him. But, like, of course, if you're going to be a holding centre back, you can't just follow your man every time they go left and right. So, that's down to the centre forward as well, being cute enough to move into the right areas and expose that. Right, so next team then, Cork. Who would be player of the season there? Wow, that's actually a tough one, because people say it was a year where Cork kicked on to the next level, and yet they didn't get as far as they had in the previous season. Robbie O'Flynn, I'd love to know how big his season would have been if he hadn't to pick up that injury. Patrick Horgan was obviously very good. There was some up and down within different performances. I don't know. I think it's hard to kind of pick out an obvious one for Cork.
Yeah, I thought I was only chatting to Donal O'Rourke, their coach, their the week before, or last week before De La Salle played, because he's involved with them, and he just said the one thing that we really were like took out this year was the consistency that Cork brought, and I think that was a consistency of performance individually as well as collectively. Like Brian Roach had his moments, Rob Downey had his moments. They were consistent, maybe without being outstanding. But Hoggy was probably their star man. I thought Harnedy was brilliant. He was brilliant against Limerick. He was brilliant against Clare as well. As I said, Brian Roach had his moments too. I'm probably finding it hard to get away from Horgan, to be honest with you. And I know he was quiet-ish against Clare, but I thought he was brilliant against Limerick when really they needed to get over the line, and he did nearly everything possible to get them over the line. I'm probably finding it hard to get away from him.
Yeah, so I think Kieran Joyce had quite a good season, and a couple of people are mentioning him here. But I'd probably give it to Rob Downey, because I thought he really grew into the season and became, like, this was his coming of age season. He's had other big performances. Remember the semi-final in 2021? He was, as the game wore on, he became more dominant than TJ Reid. So I thought that was a brilliant performance that day. But I thought this season he really settled into it. I kind of agree with you that Patrick Horgan had some really high moments, and Brian Roach is a great call. He had an impact in midfield. But for me now, I would be going and pushing hard for Rob Downey.
Oh, I think you've said that a couple of times in recent weeks, and I think you've been overly generous now, I have to say. I think you've been overly generous if you go back.
Not for me. Not for me.
Not for me. Yeah, that's fair enough. It would be still Horgan for me, to be honest with you. And I know someone said there Hurlem 1, 2, 3, 4 said quiet against Clare and still got 1-4 against from play. But you remember that game? Like he did get 1-4 from play. But like, I still thought he was better against Limerick, being honest with you. Do you know what I mean? And sometimes stats can be a bit deceptive in that way too.
Yeah, and Adrian McGrath says, don't agree at all, R.E. Downey. Well, look, I really do think he was excellent as the year wore on. So do you want to push hard here now? Do you want to veto my push for Downey and say it's Horgan? I'll allow you a veto.
I do, yeah. I wouldn't... Rob Downey was good this year, but I wouldn't stand over him being Cork's best player. I put it this way: is Rob Downey guaranteed? It's funny. You could probably say the same about Horgan. Is he guaranteed his place next year? And what will his place be for Cork?
He's guaranteed
7 or 3.
7.
And what about Mark Coleman?
Mark Coleman, I'd be shocked if he hasn't moved to midfield or even wing forward.
Okay, interesting. Okay. Thought Decky Dalton had his moments this year as well. Particularly in the early stages. I thought he was brilliant against Tip. Probably petered out as the campaign went on, but that's probably something to do with the fact that he's probably been injury plagued the last couple of years, and I think the volume of games and the proximity of the game has probably caught up with him as things went on.
Traumspieler says Kieran Joyce was good. Lols, still laughing that you didn't even mention Tony Kelly for Clare. I think that's fair. Like, I mean, we talk about him plenty over the course of the years, but I don't know. I think he's had some brilliant games, but yeah, I think we were fair enough in terms of having Shane O'Donnell and John Conlon as the shortlist.
I would have said so too. Obviously, Kelly was unbelievable against Dublin. Obviously, much quieter against Kilkenny when the need was probably the greatest.
Dublin were cat. Like, Dublin left themselves wide open.
Dublin were cat. Me, I don't know who loved that. But it's a fair point, and I thought O'Donnell consistently was brilliant throughout, and then when they really needed him against Kilkenny, I thought he was very good as well. And that's probably what tips the scales over Conlon, over Mark Rogers, Adam Hogan, and to a lesser extent, I'd say Tony Kelly.
Okay, Dublin. I'm going to say at the start of the year, I put me sort of neck on the block and I said Paddy Doyle was going to be one of the young players of the year. And I know Kelly got the hat-trick off him and all that kind of stuff, but I don't blame him for that because Dublin left themselves so wide open. I'd be putting him in the shortlist there. There's probably a few others you could mention. Donald Burke had some great moments. I think Danny Sutcliffe was very good as the season wore on. Mark Rogan had a very good season, I felt. Is there anyone else you would be including in that shortlist?
Yeah, I thought Keane O'Sullivan had a really good year as well. Very dangerous at different stages. Nice eye for goal. Paul Crummy was very good against Clare that day as well. I don't know if it's because he went off early against Clare or what, but I thought Donald Burke was brilliant this year. And maybe it would have been a bit of a different game had he stayed on the pitch. But I thought he was easily Dublin's best player this year, I have to say. Thought he was outstanding. Even the score from underneath the Hogan against Wexford to win it. I think it was the winning score. I thought Donald Burke was brilliant. And his tallies would stand up against anyone in the country, I'd say, throughout the year. The fact that he went off against Clare early that day, I think maybe is somewhat people are taking it away from his overall season, but I thought he was brilliant.
Adrian McGrath says the quiet against Kilkenny isn't fair. Kelly had to play much deeper once Taylor got hurt.
Yeah, but just on that, but like, was he on the ball? Was he on the ball? Did he influence the game? I'm not saying he doesn't have to score 4 or 5 points to influence the game. I'm just saying, did he influence the game a lot?
Yeah, well, I think this is like when you talk about Clare, if you say anything other than Tony Kelly's the greatest player Clare have ever produced, you're insulting. And of course we're not. We think he's an excellent player, but like that's a couple of semi-finals where it hasn't happened. And it's not like we're saying he's not a big game player. Of course he is. Look at the performances he's had against Limerick in those Munster finals, or of course the All-Ireland final going back many moons. Of course he's a big game player, but we can't ignore that he didn't have the influence he wanted in those games. And like you can say, the ball wasn't put in his hand, but like you go out there, especially you're a top player like that, you have to make sure that you get yourself into the game. So I don't know. I wouldn't go with that. You can't criticise TK, lad, says Limerick man, P-Well 74.
Hey, you can't criticise too many Limerick lads either, P-Well.
Oh, between Limerick and Clare, they're the two most sensitive supporter groups that you could ever come across. I think it's, they're out there going kind of sort of Springfield and Shelbyville. Oh, they're like this, they're like that. You're the exact same, lads. You're the exact same. You're both trigger happy all the time. Emil89 says, Donald Burke, any other answer is wrong. Huge loss against Clare and has to be Donald Burke, says Joe Butler. Traumspieler says, Kelly is being judged to different standards than every other player. It's a testament to how good he is, I guess. Yeah, I suppose to some degree. Like, you do expect the best from someone that good, but like in those games, you expect at least, he'll have some sort of an impact. Even if it's a little bit quieter, you want to have that, decent impact. His last semi-finals versus Galway by 2, Kilkenny by 2, he's been very poor in all since ML89, Savage in 2013, but that's a while ago now. But look, he has had some unbelievable performances in other big games, so I wouldn't be taking a pop at him per se. But we always try to be realistic when we're reviewing these things.
Yeah,
I think we always try to be fair.
Yeah, and I would say that Brian Lohan generally has gotten the best out of Tony Kelly. I would say Brian Lohan has gotten more out of Tony Kelly in the last couple of years than even his 2013 season. Obviously, they won the All-Ireland in 2013. Remember the performance COVID against Wexford? Absolutely outrageous. Where he was putting points over from the sideline. Obviously, that Munster final performance against Limerick last year. There's just, outside of a couple of games that we've probably mentioned there where he hasn't been to the standards that we expect, I think he's been unbelievable over the last 3 or 4 years. And that's thrown a fairly serious ankle injury into the mix as well.
What about Galway?
Galway this year, right. We gave them a C in our when we went through our grades. Kevin Cooney was a player that definitely we mentioned very, very favourably. Different type of player. Keenan Fatty as well. Cooney, I just thought was, even Cooney set up for Cathal Mannion's goal in the All-Ireland semi-final was brilliant. He probably missed several chances as well at different stages, but I thought he showed up really well as regards a new player coming in. Dottie Burke had a couple of moments, but was he as consistent as he normally would be? Probably not. Sean Lanham was really good out around the middle of the park. Evan Nyland had some moments. All-Ireland semi-final aside, Conor Whelan had some outrageous performance. Man of the match against Tip. He's man of the match in the Leinster final that they lost as well. And when you go through, like, who's going to get an All-Star for Galway this year? Probably just Conor Whelan, you would say, realistically. And that was after Jackie Tyrrell called him the one-trick pony. It'd be Conor Whelan again. He was brilliant.
Yeah, Fergus Butler, Whelan no contest for Galway, and Whelan lads move on. But
the issue I'm having here is the amount of forwards we're picking. But I'm sure the backs will have their day eventually.
Yeah, Joe Butler also adds in that it's Conor Whelan. Next county to mention is it going to be Limerick, actually? Let's just do this alphabetically. Yeah, so Kilkenny, actually, I should say. Who's coming to mind for you?
When Adrian Mullen was on the field at different stages, he was very good, but he wouldn't be in the mix for the All-Star kind of conversation. Listen, it's Owen Cody, like, sure, realistically. He's probably still in the hurler of the year conversation. You would say that this was the year where he took the Kilkenny senior team probably by the scruff of the neck, and this is the year where you're thinking, okay, I'm not saying he's going to have the same career as TJ Reid, but this was the year where he took it on and said, yeah, I'm going to be the man
Hugh
to lead
Lawler.
Kilkenny forward. Yeah, no, Hugh Lawler was
Lawler's
brilliant
up
as well.
there.
Hugh Lawler's definitely up there. Mikey Butler had a good year. Even though when we get into the All-Star conversation, it's going to be interesting to see what that full back line is. They both had good seasons. Paddy Deegan had a good final, a bit of kind of retribution maybe after the 2022 final. Who else are we
Owen
looking at?
Murphy.
Yeah, but he's definitely going to be remembered for that moment of absolute brilliance, saving for Peter Duggan in the semi-final. I'd say it probably would come down to Hugh Lawler, probably, and Owen Cody. But
You'd have to give props to Tom Phelan as well for a bit of a breakthrough season.
yeah, sure. He was man of the match at stages of the All-Ireland final. Do you know what I mean?
3 points scored, Adrian McGrath says, Clare and Limerick is one population with two teams, best rivalry in GA by a mile, ferocious with little or no bitterness. Well, the way ye have such hair-trigger reactions to any criticism, I'm not sure. It's just, I don't know, maybe you've no bitterness between you, although the Clare Times social media page would suggest there is. Joe Butler says, Hugh Lawler. TOS1986 says, can we skip Wexford, please? Yeah,
No.
to be honest, we're going to be struggling there. Traumspieler says, Owen Murphy, Kilkenny arguably, Owen Cody missing an All-Ireland final if you want to apply the Tony Kelly standard to him.
I wouldn't have said that now. I wouldn't have said that. Like, I know he got the goal, he flashed the goal across. Remember that brilliant piece where he did the dummy hand pass, banged the ball off the ground? Like, Limerick had space gobbled up in the Kilkenny forward, and I still thought he was very good in the All-Ireland final. I wouldn't take too much off his season for the All-Ireland final. Was he still one of Kilkenny's best players in the All-Ireland final? I would say he was.
I'd give it to Hugh Lawler, slightly ahead of Owen Cody. And I think Owen Cody had a brilliant season. What did he score altogether? 521. So yeah, he's right up there, but I'd give it to Hugh Lawler.
What would definitely put some pluses in Hugh Lawler's column is, like, Aaron Gillane is looking like he's going to be hurler of the year. Hugh Lawler kept him relatively quiet in the All-Ireland final for the second year running.
Quiet.
Yeah, and kept Gillane to 3 points the year previous, and got the better of that duel, and probably got the better of the duel in this year's final as well. I'm still finding it very hard not to give it to Owen Cody though.
Okay, Hugh Lawler it is. So we've confirmed that it is Hugh Lawler. Okay, next team that we're going to discuss it's going to be Limerick. So let's give it to Aaron Gillane and leave it at that, yeah?
Now, the thing about Limerick here is Gillane was outstanding, but I don't know. I have a real soft spot for Dan Morrissey, I have to say. And I thought he was unbelievable this year, particularly when they weren't going well. There was a couple of lads that really drove the ship forward when they weren't going well in Munster. Dan Morrissey was one. The brother Tom was another. Dermot Burns, Kyle Hayes, and probably Aaron Gillane. They kept the ship afloat. Flanagan to a lesser extent as well. They kept the ship afloat when they were in really, really choppy waters. And what Will O'Donovan
has to be mentioned as well.
Yeah, Darragh O'Donovan was outstanding too, and even Will O'Donoghue. I should have had O'Donovan in the mix with those other guys as well. And the way Will O'Donoghue came in and slotted in at number 6, and after 25 minutes of the Galway game, you're kind of thinking, yeah, it looks like this guy's probably played there. From then on, it probably looks like this guy's played there forever. So I thought he was absolutely outstanding too. I thought Dan Morrissey, though, filled a hell of a lot of holes that were left from Sean Finn's absence. And as good as Gillane was, and he could be hurler of the year, but there's a personal kind of opinion in this, I just thought Dan Morrissey was outstanding from start to finish this year.
Yeah, and Adrian McGrath says Donovan, 1 vote for every game he played well in. Like he did, yeah, he was brilliant all year. Traumspieler, totally agree with Verney, RE Dan Morrissey. What a player, never fouls, so composed. I think it's between Dermot Burns and Aaron Gillane, if I'm honest. And like, I think Gillane has to get hurler of the year this year, which I mean the Patrick's well are racking up a ridiculous amount of hurler of the year awards. And Colin O'Halloran says, when you list them all out already, I'm sickened about next year. Lynch and Finn out too, Christ. Yeah, like, look, I'd be pushing for Gillane here, but, you know, I kind of rammed through Hugh Lawler in the last one. So if you want the next veto here, go ahead.
Well, I tell you what's really worrying for the chasing pack here. We're after naming about 10 lads who had brilliant years. And that is really, really worrying for everyone. Because to me, like, Dan Morrissey's early 30s now, and you're thinking, Father Time should maybe start catching up with him. It definitely is not catching up with him, and he's an absolute specimen of a man. And as one of the viewers said there, he just doesn't foul. He just does everything right. And it's not spectacular. It's just, he just does everything really, really well, and is able to tie down some of the best forwards in the country. And then you have Sean Finn to come back. Then you have, if Keane Lynch continues his All-Ireland final form into next year, that's really worrying. The most successful captain in hurling's history is going to be back, Declan Hannon, as well. Like, you'd have to say, like, it is very, very worrying. There's no sign, especially based on the last couple of games of this year, there's no sign that they're going over the top. No sign whatsoever. And Toss 1986 didn't even mention Hayes.
You
Yeah,
did.
like, to me, we did mention Hayes, and to me, like, he is up there. He's in the shortlist for hurler of the year. I'm just saying Dan Morrissey's probably a personal preference with me. Maybe it's the full backline club or something, I don't know. But for me, it's Dan Morrissey, and that is absolutely no slight on anything Aaron Gillan did this year.
What do you mean full backline club? You're more of a centre forward these days.
I know. I've gone back the other end again.
Are you?
Yeah.
So holding the centre back scoreless wasn't good enough for them.
Oh, I don't even know if it did that, to be honest with you.
Okay, next team to talk about, Tipperary. Sure, look, we could be here all day.
We could be here all day trying to find out who is the best player.
Like, at times it was Jake Morris because he was racking up goals. At times it was Alan Tynan because he was, produced very good performances. And at times it was nobody because Tipperary weren't going all that well. Like, even Gerard O'Connor, I thought was really, really good. And then he got the injury, and that probably stymied his progress a little bit. Is there anyone that you think is head and shoulders above the rest in terms of Tipperary?
No, I thought Noel McGrath.
Reece Shelley had a couple of great games as well.
Yeah, Reece Shelley probably announced himself. Like, he was treading puck outs through the eye of a needle there at different stages in games. And it's hard to say he's nailed down the number one spot, but you would fancy him to be number one next year ahead of Barry Hogan. And it'd be interesting to see whether Brian Hogan is back on the scene as well, and whether they have three keepers with a lot of experience fighting for that spot. Tall Noel McGrath had his moments. Thought Seamus Kennedy had his moments this year as well at different stages in a new position at times in the half forward, and then he was playing wing back sometimes as well. Tynan was brilliant. In the first couple of games, I'd say in Munster, probably tailed off a bit. Gerard O'Connor had his moments too. I just thought, I know he was tied down at certain stages, but even when he got going against Galway, Jake Morris was very, very lively. Just struggled to get his hands on the ball. Like, Jake Morris was threatening to run absolute riot against Limerick. He was threatening to beat Limerick by himself at stages there. And if you're looking at someone who's probably, maybe it's not an award that anybody wants, but the most improved player, or a player who really made a stamp this year, probably would be Jake Morris for me. And there's plenty of signs that maybe he could lead a tip forward line going forward for the next 5 or 6 years.
Yeah, other players that impressed me at different times. And look, let's get this straight from the get-go. Tipperary underperformed massively against Waterford and Galway. So there's no player from Tipperary that played brilliantly in all 6 games this year. But I'd say Brian O'Mara really established himself this year. Michael Breen going back to the full backline belatedly after years of me harping on about it. I thought he had, for the most part, a pretty good season back there. I think Owen Connolly really developed as a player this year. I think Dan McCormick had a pretty solid season. Like, there was times when he was man-marking and did some really good jobs. Wasn't it against Limerick in Thurles that he had a great day against Grode Hegarty?
Grode Hegarty, yeah.
For example. Other players, I thought Conor Stapleton had his moments as well. Jason Ford, of course, getting injured that day against Cork, and so he was out for a little bit of time. But yeah,
I think from a Tipperary point of view, Shane, there, and I think there's a bit of promise in this. Some lads had moments at different stages. Lads showed that they were capable of performing at that level. The thing is with Limerick is that lads do that every day. You know what I mean? And but like, I'd agree with you. In the likes of Conor Stapleton, definitely had his moments. It's just probably been more consistent, and it's the proximity of the games. It's been able to do it every week, every second week. It's been able to do it over those 4 games in Munster. That was probably a major problem that Tip had this year. Maybe that's an S&C deficit that they will maybe narrow or close in on over the next couple of years. But at least there were different lads that stepped up at different stages, and that's, to me, that's promising.
Yeah, so I'd probably just about give it to Jake Morris.
Yeah. I'd go with Jake Morris as well, yeah.
Yeah, and PL74, all he needed, presumably talking about Dan McCormick, was a saddle for Mark and Hegarty. Hey, you do what you need to do.
I think that's a compliment.
Yeah, and it's not like the Limerick players are shrinking violets either. So come on, lads. Okay, we've only a couple of more teams left. Okay, who's next in the list here? I presume it's Westmeath. So we probably haven't seen quite as much.
Waterford, I'd say. Waterford first, I'd
Oh
say.
yeah, Watford. Nobody. They really didn't have that great a season, did they?
I'd give Mark Fitzgerald a lot of props now, I have to say, for his first kind of real season in the team. Thought he was really solid, mostly in the full back line. Showed plenty of signs that he could be there for the guts of the next decade or so. There weren't too many players that came away with credit across the whole season. Patrick Fitzgerald only got his first start, I think it's in the tip game. He ended up with maybe 3 points that day. Desi ended up with something like 1-3 that day. Who else are we talking here? Like, even for that tip game, they were missing Prunty, they were missing Ozzy, weren't they? Were they missing Jamie Byrne that day as well? Billy Nolan was good in the goals, and he was very good out the field the day against Tipperary as well in his first county game ever out the pitch at senior level. I'd probably be Mark Fitzgerald for me, for a fella who came in from the cold and made a fair impact in defence.
Yeah, do you know what? I'd be happy enough to go with that because they were so unimpressive overall. Yeah, no problem. We'll go with that. Westmeath then. I suppose there's players that people have heard of, the likes of, I suppose, Angus Clark, and you've got a couple of the guys there in the forward line as well, including Killian Doyle. The people, they would be somewhat familiar with. It's probably another tough one because of all the teams, we probably just didn't see them quite as much as some of the other teams. So there's no point in hiding from that. Is there anyone that's jumping out to you that you probably came across more than others this year?
Yeah, no, there is. Tommy Doyle was good this year. He's good most years. Niall Mitchell was struggling with injury and came in and got those 2 goals against Wexford, crucial goals. Funnily enough, the player I'm going to go for that was their best player of the year actually ended up getting sin binned against Wexford. But he was brilliant throughout the year. Dara Egerton, who's been around the scene for a good while, he had a really, really consistent year. And I was only chatting Joe Fortune there recently about this as well. And he said as well, he just thought he was outstanding over the course of the year, league and championship. Really solid. He made a block or some sort of a mad block or save. Forget who it was from who against Wexford in a real crucial stage of the game where they could have went 9 or 10 down again. I'd be giving it to Dara Egerton.
Yeah, I wouldn't say Niall Mitchell is too far off it either, and Kieran Doyle is putting up plenty of scores this year. So there's probably a few there, all right, but I whatever it was this year, I just didn't quite see as much of them. Sinbin says Cahill O'Halloran, rugby getting to you?
Well, it was. He was sent off for 10 minutes. Is it not the sin bin? Black card, like it's the same thing, like.
Yeah, I know, but people don't like the rugby terminology around here. Whatever happened, Gerard Brown, he was looking great for Tipperary a few years back. He got a knee injury at the start of the year, so that ruled him out for the entire season. He did come back for Cashel King Cormac's recently. Let's see then. We have to talk about Wexford. So, wow. Who do we even... I mean, wow.
Yeah, James Lauder came in obviously in the goals for his first season. Thought he acquitted himself quite well. Liam Ryan was carrying a knock throughout the campaign. Dee O'Keefe didn't play that much at different stages. Conor Mack didn't play that much. When Chin was on the field, he was very good. He obviously missed the first game against Galway. At times, Rory O'Connor showed up really, really well, but probably wasn't that consistent. Yeah, struggling to find. Maybe you might just get one of their team sheets up there. Maybe there's someone kind of obvious that we're forgetting. Hanlon was good at stages, but I think Niall O'Brien done him for the 2 goals under 2 high balls against Westmeath.
I think
Foley was good at times.
I mean, there was days when maybe Lee Chin did put up scores. Liam McGovern got 2-1 against Kilkenny. That wasn't so bad. Rory O'Connor had a few days where he put up like 5 points one day, 3, a couple of those were frees, 4 another day. A couple of the young lads did okay. I suppose Connor Devitt did okay this season. I think there's a case to be made for nobody being named for Wexford.
Oh my God.
It was just it was that disappointing a season.
Jesus Christ. I don't know. I can't pick an outstanding player. Can you just fly through the team sheet really, really quickly there, would say, for the Westmeath game? Is there someone obvious that we're missing? Like, at stages during the league, I thought Charlie McGuckin was very good. He tailed off. He didn't actually play in that last game against Kilkenny. A couple of the younger faces kind of impressed at different stages, but you wouldn't say they were outstanding or their best player throughout the year.
Okay, I'll read out the team that started against Wexford. So James Lawler, Shane Reck, Liam Ryan, Conor Devitt, Ian Carty, who played a couple of games, all right. Matthew O'Hanlon, Simon Donoghue, Jack O'Connor, Cahill Dunbar, Liam McGovern, Lee Chin, Oisin Foley, Rory O'Connor, Conor MacDonald, and Mikey Dwyer. Charlie McGuckin came in there, Conor Hearn came in, and D. O'Keefe came in. Look, I think to nearly be an insult. You know, it's like, when Ireland lost to France there last week and didn't kick a ball, and lucky that France didn't score 3 or 4 more goals, and you see Chidozie Ogbene getting man of the match, and he's almost embarrassed to get it. I think it would nearly embarrass any Wexford player here to call them player of the season. I think we just straight up don't give it to anybody.
By God, the fair cannon fodder for next year already. But I don't know. I think it'd probably be tokenistic to pick out someone, being honest with you. So I'm okay with that.
Yeah, okay. So that's it in terms of the teams there. That's our awards for this year, if you can call them awards for a couple of the teams anyway.